And we are looking here at Unit 6, Lesson 5, Effects of Change. We're getting real close to the end of Unit 6 now, ladies and gentlemen. Our key words here are adaptation, mass extinction, and species. So I feel like this is, to me, kind of an interesting lesson as well, talking a bit about what are some of the major effects that the environment has on species' ability to survive. We've talked about natural selection. We've talked about how having fittest, you know, adaptations for that particular environment ensures survivability. It increases your likelihood of survival, right, and passing on your genes to the next generation. But unfortunately, sometimes the environment changes, and sometimes it changes very, very rapidly. So, rapid environmental change can lead to massive extinctions. And extinctions is when a species, like all members of a species, die off. And so there's no genes left, there's no individuals left to be able to repopulate and continue that species going forward. And so we do see evidence of mass extinctions throughout the fossil record. In fact, we see 5 major mass extinctions that have occurred throughout geologic history. Those are just the major ones where you have over 50% of all living things on Earth going extinct at one fell swoop. So you know something really, really major happened. We'll talk a little bit about one of those major mass extinctions, probably the most famous, albeit not the largest of all the major mass extinctions that have occurred. And we'll talk about the potential for a 6th major mass extinction in this lesson. So let's see here. So I'm skipping on because it talks a little bit about, individuals and how traits increase your likelihood of survival. But now we'll talk about catastrophic change. So when catastrophic change happens and the environment changes very, very rapidly, sometimes organisms, they just can't adapt quick enough. They don't have the physical characteristics to help them to survive the new changed environment. Perhaps they can't change their behaviors or find a new food source or whatever. Depending on the environmental change we're talking about, whatever they need to do might be very, very different. So we have a major change that occurred at the end of the Cretaceous period, about 65.5 million years ago. For many, 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 many years, this was known as the KT mass extinction. It is now known apparently as the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction. I did not know this till I read this because I'm old and things change. So your classification of time changes too throughout. Again, classification is something we impose upon the natural world, and so that can change. So I did bring up this thing here off the internet, just talking a little bit about the different periods in the Earth's history. So we're looking at the end of the Cretaceous period that would come before, like underneath the bottom of this picture. That would be Cretaceous, and then just on top of it is the Paleogene. That's kind of in this darkish pink color here. Used to be known as just the Tertiary period, which kind of was a very long period, followed by the Quaternary. Now we've divided the Tertiary into 2 different periods, the Paleogene and the Neogene, and they're divided even further into different epochs. We have the Paleocene, and the Eocene, and the Oligocene, and then the Neogene is divided up into the Miocene and the Pliocene, and then our Quaternary period, which is the modern period of on Earth right now, is the Pleistocene, and we are right now living in the Holocene. So it doesn't really matter as much, but just getting you familiar with these units of time. So previous to the Paleogene, we had the Cretaceous period. And in the Cretaceous period, dinosaurs walked the earth, right? Among a lot of other different organisms. At the end of the Cretaceous period, what we believe happened is a big meteor impact hit. And this meteor strike wiped out about 65% of all living things on Earth. It was a pretty major mass extinction. So that they're saying is that there's lots of evidence that suggests the meteor actually did hit. There's a big old crater off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico, known as the Chicxulub crater. And when you date the stuff that's in the crater, the rocks and the different minerals that are found there, they date back to about 65.5 million years ago. There's also lots of other evidence. Which they don't really go into a lot of detail here in this lesson, but they found a lot of evidence of impact all around the world. That's actually pretty cool. There's actually a boundary layer of ash and iridium and stuff like that that's found just at that Cretaceous Paleogene boundary in the fossil record. So it's pretty well supported as far as that happening. What they did find out, or what they hypothesize here, is that what would have happened following such a large impact. Anything within 625 miles, says, which covers an area larger than Texas and Mexico combined, would have been instantly killed by a giant fireball. So you didn't want to be right near the epicenter there. Earthquakes would have set up a giant tsunami that would have been 1,000 feet tall, which would have flooded the land. And they put in parentheses tidal wave, which is something I don't like to see there at all, because a tidal wave is a misnomer. It is a word that is old, archaic, and is not a descriptor of what a tsunami actually is. We would have had 600-mile-per-hour winds blown outward from the impact site. Just hours after the impact, the sky would have been darkened by the dust it created, and bits of burning dust, ash, and rubble would start falling from the sky. The soot and the ash in the atmosphere, along with the smog, created fires that would have darkened the sky for months, killing vegetation and cooling the climate. Obviously, that's a really, really bad day, right? Such catastrophic events, it's easy to understand why so many animals went extinct. But some animals survived, even flourished. So now we're on the other side of the extinction coin. Extinction changes the environment rapidly, and many organisms do not survive these mass extinction events. But those that do, the playing field has been leveled to some degree. Obviously, the conditions were pretty volatile on Earth at the time, but you've lost a lot of competition and you've lost predators and things like that. And so it kind of opens the door for organisms to survive that really were just kind of on the fringe before. So it goes on to talk about how this event led to the thriving of mammals. So mammals existed prior to the KT mass extinction, or see, I'm old again, K PG extinction, right? So mammals already were around, but they were small and rodent-like, and they kind of were nocturnal. They lived at night. They didn't come out during the daytime. They were really hiding a lot because there was lots of predators around and stuff like that. And so researchers believe that one of the characteristics of mammals really helped them to survive this very catastrophic event, and that's that we are homeotherms. Mammals are able to maintain their internal body temperature even when external conditions are cold and stuff like that. So, because of their ability to maintain their body temperature, and honestly, it's probably a lot of it has to do with the size of mammals as well. Um, a lot of research shows that many dinosaurs were likely homeotherms as well. So I'm not sure that this is like the only point that helped with why we survived and they didn't. A lot of it has to do with many different other things. Small, able to hide and live underground, and the conditions were pretty harsh outside and stuff like that. So, there's multiple reasons why mammals flourished and dinosaurs did not, right? So again, just changing the environment in the terms of, in this case, fairly drastically, also changes what it means to be fit. So fitness isn't something that you can define as an absolute. Fitness is dependent upon the environment. And so we see, and you can read through this because it's actually really interesting to read through, how many, many years pass, hundreds of thousands to millions of years, that led to changes within the mammal community, giving rise to eventually modern day humans. But that took place over millions and millions of years. So one of the questions that I have on here is to kind of describe some of the changes that occurred in the population of mammals within the Paleogene here, kind of looking and seeing how those mammals changed over time. And then finishing up with this lesson, it talks a bit about um, how today we are affecting our environment. It's not a meteor impact, it's not a massive event that occurred all at once. However, the environment is changing much more rapidly than organisms can adapt and survive. So we are seeing extinctions that are occurring fairly regularly. And when you think about how quickly these are happening within the order of just a couple hundred years, really from a geological time scale perspective, that's almost instantaneously. So if we were looking back at this event millions of years in the future, we wouldn't really see this as occurring as a slow thing, right? In geological time, it would have happened pretty much instantaneously. So there's arguments that can say that the changes that we are inflicting upon the environment right now due to adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, due to increasing in burning fossil fuels and the industrialization of society, is really kind of causing a sixth major mass extinction. It's not nearly as showy as a meteor impact, but it certainly does have the same effect overall. So that's it for this lesson, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you learned something new. Again, read up on some of those changes that occurred in organisms through the Paleogene as well, because I think they're pretty interesting. But otherwise, I will see you guys in our next lesson.